This is The Storied Outdoors, a podcast somewhere between Lewis and Tolkien and Lewis and Clark, finding clarity in the stories we tell and the adventures that shape us.
Welcome to The Storied Outdoors. I am your host, Brian Gill, alongside my good buddy and co-host, Brad Hill. We are joined today by a special guest that I've been dying to get on the show. Andy Blanks is the co-founder and publisher for Iron Hill Press. He is an author, a speaker, a former Marine, avid outdoorsman, woodworker, a podcast host. He lives in Birmingham, Alabama with his wife, Brendt, and their 4 children. The best way to describe Andy, in my opinion, he is the most published author that you've never heard of.
and a big fan of hot chicken, because that's where you and I go eat every time we get a chance.
We have cleaned a lot of hot chicken plates.
We have.
He's authored dozens of books and sold hundreds of thousands. My favorite way to describe him is that he is a mentor and a friend of mine for nearly 24 years. When I was a junior in high school in Eufaula, Alabama, Andy was a college student and came down to be my disciple, now leader, at First Baptist Church of Eufaula, and that's where we met, and we reconnected when I was in grad school in Birmingham, and we've been writing books together ever since. So, Andy, man, welcome to the show.
Yeah, buddy, that was quite the introduction.
Well, we go way back.
Yeah, I'm gonna hang out with you more often. Make me feel good about myself.
I was thinking about who about no longer about you or Brad, and I think you got Brad beat by a couple of years.
We took a little break, but yeah, we started. Brad, when did you meet Bryan?
You were in college, Brian, weren't you at Auburn?
Yeah, I think it's 2002.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So just a couple of years difference there.
I tell people because that's a fun story Bryan had that's where our paths crossed. But I think even though I think you were a high school junior and I was a college sophomore, I think your faith was much more mature than mine. I don't know if I led you very well in that small group at the time. I think you probably taught me more than I taught you.
No, and you were a young Christian. I do know that because I think not too long before you had accepted Christ. And but man, that was the beginning of a long friendship. That's really fun.
Good.
That's right.
Well, I tell you, we'll lead off with I appreciate your service. A lot of friends that have served, and I'm not one of those people, but I know those people that have, and I'm thankful for you. As one who's traveled internationally, I sure appreciate what men like you have done in serving our country. Bryan, he said something. He said former Marine, and if I understand it correctly, it's once a Marine, always a Marine. You're not.
Yeah, we say former Marine. You don't say ex-Marine.
Right.
You don't say ex-Marine. That's right. So you can say
just
former
make sure.
Marine.
Make sure you're a Marine. That's right.
I don't want to be on the bad side of that conversation.
I'm old and run down now, man. That was a long time ago.
Hey, man, what's that? The great country song, man. You're as good once as you ever were.
Oh, what a song. Unfortunately, here's the deal. The older you get, the more that comes up. I remind myself that song a lot. I'm like, I might could be good for one more go right here. But yeah, that's good. Well, hey, thank you, man. I had a good time, served with some great guys, and got to blow stuff up, and it was fun.
Man, I'm sure I imagine there's lots of stories when it comes to telling stories that come from that era of your life. And as a writer and publisher, you spend your time in story. What is it, in your opinion, about story that really connects with people, no matter how old or young they are?
That's a great question, Brad. I think for me, there's really 2 things. One, I think we see ourselves in each other's stories. When you tell a story, we know what happens. You guys, I've heard y'all mention about sitting around a campfire. That wonderful one person starts, it just goes, ta, 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 ta. Like it just, that's my favorite part about story and the outdoors and hanging out. I mean, I'm going to go turkey hunting next weekend with some guys that I've grown up with since we were in 3rd grade. We get together a few times a year, and literally what we'll do for the first 3 or 4 hours is just sit around the tailgate of a truck and just tell stories. And most of them are stories we've already told, 100 times before.
Yeah, absolutely.
We all know them, and it's
better and more embellished as they go.
Oh gosh, yes, absolutely. I think story invites us into each other's narratives. I've been thinking lately, I've just had a couple interactions in the last 6 months or so where I've been very mindful of God as storyteller. And what I mean by that is, and I think Bryan, I've talked about this before, but God, if you think about this big picture themes, redemption, salvation, all those things, right? God could have accomplished all of those things without the narrative flair of how he weaves our lives together. I mean, how many times have you had those moments where, you're over here and you talk to this person, you realize, well, they know this person's interacted in this way. And I think God, when it talks about us being made in the image of the Creator, I think that's part of what that means is that God we have that creative sort of bent to ourselves. We're drawn to story because God weaves story through our lives. Listen, he could have saved us and redeemed us, and it could have been great and like mechanical,
It's like that question people would ask Tolkien. Why didn't we just fly the eagles over and drop the ring in? Right? We could have done this a whole lot easier in a whole lot one book, right? And we could have just flown those eagles down and dropped that thing in the top of Mount Doom, and boom, it's over. And I think there's literally an audio clip of Tolkien telling some guy to just shut up.
Yeah.
It's my story.
That's great.
I'll find that clip and I'll link that in the story because it's hilarious. He literally, all he says is shut up, because what he cared about was not the end result as much as it was for him, the journey. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think for God's not, he cares about the end result ultimately, right? Salvation and his glory and him being glorified. But I think he cares as deeply about our journey.
Yeah.
And his storytelling is the best in the world.
I know.
That's ever. Great. And so I think you're right, man. I think that's a good point.
Yeah. And if, don't get me started on Tolkien, then we wouldn't get to meet Tom Bombadil or Riders of Rohan. I mean, come on. That's the good stuff.
Yeah, I heard somebody say, we're talking about the Amazon Lord of the Rings series.
Yeah.
And somebody said, $1 billion, we better get one episode of Tom Bombadil.
You better believe it. You better believe it. Love him.
That's awesome, man.
Hey, this may not make the final cut because we're about to nerd out here, but I read a thing the other day that there is fan theory that goes back all the way to the original, like just a few years after Tolkien released it, that says Bombadil is like an evil force. Like he's literally like the destructive force in Middle Earth. And I mean, I'm telling you, I fell onto it and fell down a rabbit hole, and there's a lot of evidence. I personally choose not to believe it. Fake news, because I love Bombadil, but I mean, I'm telling you, it shook me a little bit.
That's good. Well, we love those stories, and we've certainly been, we've been moved by those stories, and will continue to be moved by those stories.
Man, I love, the idea of story, and you talk about, take part in others' narratives. And I feel like, and you and I, we've been working in men's ministry together and men's resources, and we've been writing books together. I feel like among men, there's almost this lost sense of adventure, and those adventures lead to good stories.
Yeah.
What Brad has said it before, you don't find great adventure sitting on a couch, none of us, you, Brad, nor I, grew up with handheld devices, we weren't glued to these screens. Like as an adult, I'm guilty of, and I'm guilty of like losing this sense of wonder.
Digital babysitter, man.
And it's also, I lose my hunger for this adventure when I'm vicariously living out these adventures of other people on social media. And so it's like, Brad and I, we always are looking at and sending back and forth Instagram posts, and it's most of the time brown trout that we're hoping that we can catch one day. But how do we reclaim that? How do we combat that in our own life, and the sense of adventure, and maybe instill that in our kids' lives?
Yeah, boy, that is the question, right? Well, first of all, we got to get outside. I mean, just straight up. I mean, literally,
pretty easy.
Yeah. I know. We just got to get outside. Like,
it's not the story indoors.
That's right.
Here's
That's a different podcast. It's a different podcast. I need to get that website though. But our son and my daughters as well. I mean, I think, and Brad, I don't know you as well as I know Bryan, but I can see this in Bryan. To me, it's a choice you make. I mean, we don't own a gaming system. We might one day. If we do, I don't have a problem with that. But man, screen time is just not a big part of our life. We don't watch TV as a family outside Auburn games and Red Sox and the Titans. Maybe, I mean, that's about it. We're outside. I was on a trip and I kept getting ring alerts on my outdoor camera, and I look, and my son and his buddy, they keep running back and forth across the driveway, Nerf gun wars out in our woods. And it just made me smile because I just thought, I'm not there. He's there. And what is he doing? He's outside.
Man, I remember when we first got our ring camera, Andy, I think I was with you, Bryan, and we'd gone up there to fish with Ben. And it was the first time I was away. And my son was playing, like you were talking about, was playing outside, but he was right by the camera. And so I pulled it up on my phone. And I started talking to him, and he snapped around real quick. He's like, "Dad, is that you, Dad?" And I said, "Always watching,
That's right.
Always watching."
Now he's talking to random people's like doorbells and things like
that.
that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
He's like, "What's your name from Monsters Inc.?"
Yeah.
Roz, was it Roz?
Yeah.
Always watching Wazowski.
I love it. That's a pretty good Roz. My son's the only one of his friends that has a bike. He's 8.
Wow.
I mean, they don't.
Oh wow.
They don't have bikes. I mean, they don't. They've got electric scooters, which I get. That's great. But like the idea that like we bought him his first full suspension mountain bike. I mean, it's not a nice one, but it's. Yeah. And he and I have gone out to Oak Mountain, and it's like the other day I was like, "Hey, go. You want to see if your buddies want to ride bikes?" He's like, "They don't have bikes." And it was just a moment where I was like, "Holy crap, they don't have bikes." I mean, for me.
Let's just get this straight. This is not some lower income area where they can't afford the bikes.
Absolutely. That's totally different. Right?
Totally different.
Totally different. This is these are middle class neighborhoods, and they've got a bunch of other fancy toys, but it's the value of go ride your bike. I mean, my bike, and you gotta be careful. This is not back in the dayism, right? I mean, but we're not that old,
right?
My bike until I was had friends that were driving, that was the gateway for everything. I mean, we would leave. I grew up in Auburn, and around Auburn, there's nothing but woods and farms and streams and lakes. And so, I mean, we'd get on our bikes.
They call it the plains, but
there's
some hills there. Bryan, though, you know about those hills.
I know. I've seen those really close up.
Yeah, I ran the half marathon back in Auburn a few months ago, and I don't remember those hills. I'd forgotten them, and then I remembered them very vividly. It's like, dang it, plains. But no, I mean, just our bike was our key to. We'd ride across town and to Chihuahua and fish and rope swing and ride bikes out to the outside the trash dump. We used to call it Planet X, and it was that the city had bought all this land for the trash dump they hadn't grown into it. We just explore all day long, and there's something lost there, with if we allow it to be lost. If we allow it to be lost, we got to be intentional, and we also have to know, I think, that it's somewhat countercultural, right? I mean, it's you're going to have to know that you're creating a value system in your kids that's going to make them a little bit different than their peers in some ways. My son said to me the other day, and y'all will love this. He said, "Dad, I'm the only one of my friends who listens to country music." And I said, "Well, good, son. We're gonna keep it that way as long as we can." So I think we got to be intentional about it, and I mean, it starts with how you spend your time and what you value, and knowing that you got to plant those seeds. And I say you got to plant those seeds. I mean, it's not hard. You take your kids outside to go fishing with them. Guess what? They fall in love with fishing. They fall in love with hiking and mountain biking, because I think that's how we're wired, and so all it's doing is just helping them connect with who God intended them to be. But you got to fight the sort of encroachment of the culture you're talking about, the device in your hand and the time suck that is.
Well, do you guys have any parenting guide rails that you guys have kind of put into place for that?
Yeah, we have pretty strict device, and we always have. I've got 4 kids. Bryan knows that. My oldest since 18, and we've always kept limits on their phones. I mean, always, because it's a value. Like, I mean, as a family, we don't watch TV. Like, Paul watches TV when he comes home from school for 30 minutes, and that's it. He may not watch it again that night. Now, he may get 20 or 30 minutes on the phone, but our kids don't get more than, an hour or two of screen time. The older ones get a little bit. Paul doesn't get an hour of screen time a day.
Yeah. We've kind of said it where our kids, we only let them really watch if it's like a weekend.
Yeah.
During the week, we pretty much just say, TV stays off. There's a few exceptions, like when Sarah and I are cooking dinner or something, we need them to be out of the way just for a few minutes. But most of the time, we try to do that too. That seems to work well. And like, they don't know, they're not really missing out on anything.
Yeah. I'm going to geek out for just a second, but I used to love being in youth ministry for many years when they first started coming out with brain mapping, and we learn more about the brain and now all the stuff they're learning about dopamine and your pleasure sensors. Like, what we know is, all the apps that we give our kids, they are hardwired. They're hardwired to trigger those dopamine as endorphins and pleasure sensors. And what happens with repeated exposure to video games and screen time, your brain craves it. Your brain craves that. And it's so, if we minimize that and we teach our kids to love things in the outdoors, and that, slower enjoyment, right? The slowness of fishing, the slowness of hunting, the peace, like, we actually are training their brains to desire things that are better for them, that are literally healthier for them. And we kind of eliminate that whole sort of instant gratification that's happening on a neurological level that's triggered by it's the same thing with TikTok. These little 5-10 second videos, man, our brain loves that. And you almost have to kind of break yourself free from that. And so again, it's about creating, I didn't know we were going to go brain mapping here, but it's about, developing healthy habits and healthy kids. Who do you want your kid to be holistically? Right. I mean, God, man, I want my kids to see the greater story of the outdoors and to be connected with people when they can walk next to them in the woods or on a trail and talk, and just relate to one another in a boat rather than having their head down on a device.
Man, that's so true. I mean, just to see, like, people have really lost the ability to have a conversation. It's
all
don't have
emojis.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have an emoji that's just going to express what you're saying in real life.
Or a GIF. It's like, I need a picture. I don't know how to explain this. I need something from the GIF library of photos. We have all our favorite ones. I'm just as bad because I like a good one just as much as the next guy.
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty fluid in GIF.
Yeah, we're definitely pulling from those, that our kids have no ideas. Like, so when I sing Grizzly Adams, and it's zooming in on Redford,
Robert Redford. Yeah. Some of that's so cultural. Yeah.
Yeah. I like that. Made me think about when you're talking about bikes and going out and riding. It made me think about how much that is. You see that in some of these, like Stranger Things has been. If you watched any of those, like, that was our childhood. You're gone out, and like I think about that. I'm like, man, were our parents really bad parents, and they just let us go out into the middle of nowhere? Because I'm not sure I want my kids riding around like Satsuma Mobile, Alabama. That may not be a great idea. They might end up in a container ship going to China.
There's some pros and cons there, definitely, Brad. My dad has a story that he would because Auburn was a real small town when I was growing up, and we just take off on our bikes. And one day he was at the teller, going through the teller at the bank, and the lady at the bank tells us, like, "Oh, hey, George, I just want you to know, Andy and them were riding their bikes out in front of cars this morning over on East University. So when you get home, and it was just that small
the
town,
bank teller did that.
The bank teller, that her husband called her or something, and it's like, yeah, we probably shouldn't have been. We probably were riding our bikes out in front of cars. I mean, honestly,
dang blank kids again.
I know. There they go. Well, yeah, there's some of that, Brad. Some of that's the world's changed a little bit, but yeah, I mean, there's got to be a balance there.
Because I missed that, there was that freedom, and that was so developmental for us as kids, building forts, and disappearing into the woods. So it was so good, and so many stories, and your imagination comes alive during that time. Oh, it was great. One of the purposes of this podcast, we love to tell these sort of untold stories. Like we said, as we were talking pre-show, the kind you would tell around a campfire. Bryan reminded me of this Lewis quote. Is there any greater pleasure on earth as a circle of Christian friends by a good fire?
It's pretty good.
So say, Andy, say we were sitting around a campfire. What's your go-to, your good story that you're gonna bust out around the campfire?
Some of my best ones I can't tell on this podcast. I mean, that's the honest to goodness truth.
There's not enough bank tellers in Birmingham to be able to pick out Paul doing something.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, some of my best ones we'd have to do off the air. I think stage of life I'm in. I was thinking about y'all's podcast and being on today, obviously, and we got 4 kids. Life's it's a beautiful chaos, right? I mean, I love it. I wouldn't trade it for anything. But we got a senior about to graduate all the way down to a second grader, and it's just busy. And I had this moment where we're thinking about just outdoors and stories. And my wife and I spent the summer in Jackson Hole before we had kids. I lived out there in a little trailer. We started out there, a little trailer, there's a little house. Long story short, it's a preacher who had like bunk houses where people could stay. And man, we stayed out there and we waited tables at the breakfast shift in town at the resort. And so we'd get up at 4:30 or 5, go wait tables every morning, and be done by 11 o'clock. We'd set up the lunch buffet and then we were out of there. And so every afternoon we were fly fishing on the elk refuge. We're backpacking behind the Tetons. I mean, right. Oh, it was great. We had some friends who lived in Bondurant, which is about 30 minutes outside of Jackson, and they had horses and their land backed up to USDA open range. And so we'd go out there and saddle up horses and just ride all afternoon, and meadows full of flowers and pronghorns just running off in the distance, and mountains. And I mean, we had just crazy stories. We were at Green River camping one weekend, and moose was in our campground, and I was scared to death. I mean, I'm in the tent and you just hear it and it sounds like a bulldozer's coming through. And I was worried about grizzlies, but I never thought about a moose, and I didn't know any better. And now you see videos of moose, like some of the most dangerous animals in the world. And we're like, Brent's trying to throw a muffin to it, to feed it like a blueberry muffin.
If you give a moose a muffin,
you're going to want another one.
Yeah, he's going to trample you to death. Is actually how that
was the adult version.
That is.
When I was up in Montana, we've written about this on the podcast. I got to do a wedding in Montana, and the day after, I got to go fish a half-day float on the Flathead. And I asked my guide that. I was like, whenever you guys are wade fishing, do you have to like constantly like keep your bear spray ready and keep your eyes ready? He's like, man, I'm not really that concerned about the grizzlies. I'm worried about the moose.
Yeah.
I was like, really? I mean, I'm from Mobile, Alabama.
Yeah.
We have white-tailed deer that you're never going to see, right?
Yeah, that's right.
We don't have to worry about a moose. So that wasn't even on my radar. So yeah, he was certainly like, I am most concerned about the moose.
We spent a good bit of time out west. I've seen a black bear. I've probably seen 6 moose. Mooses? Meese?
I don't know.
All I hear is Brian Regan in my ears right now. Many much moosing.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, but no, I just booked another. I think the connection of that is, falling in love with the West, falling in love with the mountains. And we took our kids out there last summer and they ate it up. I mean, I watched my kids for the first time we took them out there. We travel a lot with our kids, but we've never taken them out there, and watching my kids come alive, watching them shed the pressure of school and popularity and friends and the things they have to navigate in social media, just watching it fall off like scales, and seeing the best versions of my kids. And so we couldn't think about the next trip fast enough. So I literally just booked plane tickets for going back out this summer to take him. I went to Jackson last summer, did Wyoming, kind of all that around there. And we're doing Moab and Durango and Silverton and Breckenridge in the summer. And it's that whole lot. I mean, that's it though. Like we don't spend our money on stuff. I don't have a lot of nice stuff in my house. I mean, listen, I love my home, got a great home, very thankful for it. I don't have a lot of nice clothes. You know, I drive an old truck. We spend our money on experiences, and that I think it's birthed a lot of having those moments as young married couples going, man, this is the vibe we want. You know, I mean, this is kind of what we want for our lives. And so to give our kids stories, you know, instead of stuff is it's something we tried to do, and I can see it as they're getting older. I can see that little seed of adventure. My oldest keeps trying to figure out ways to do internships out west, you know, in Colorado.
Stories.
I want to go do that. And it's like,
stories
okay,
instead of stuff.
Taken. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that.
I like that a lot. I think it made me think about, we're talking about not watching TV, but made me think about it, seeing the world sort of catch on to that idea of, I was obviously brilliant marketing by Expedia, but I think it was, what's his name that plays Obi-Wan Kenobi? You know, he's walking through all this stuff and he's like, you know, when you're on your deathbed, you know, are you going to go, man, I wish I'd have bought more stuff?
You're not going to.
No, you're not going to. It's a powerful, really absolutely true point is like, you're going to wish you spent more time with those you love. You know, you're going to wish that you had done more things with them. Like, so that story instead of stuff is really true. And I think the greater world is starting to pick up on that very, very rich truth.
Yeah.
One of the things that, you know, I feel like you're in a really sweet spot, Andy, as far as the age of your kids go, because they're going to remember these things. You know, I was talking to my son the other day and showing him some pictures, you know, just a couple of years ago. You know, he's just now 7, and he's like, I don't even remember that. I'm like, this was a huge moment. We invested and we put stuff in, and I'm like, son. But I was like, well, he's 4 or 5 years old, and but now I'm thinking, okay, now he's 7. My daughter's 5.5. You know, they're getting to the point where they're going to start remembering these things, and now is the most important time to be intentional about that. You know,
I'm always sort of shocked by people that remember stuff from that age. I'm like, I don't remember anything from like 4, 3, 4, maybe even 5. I struggle to remember back that far. Yeah. And some people just rattle off these memories. I'm like, how do you remember that? Like, maybe am I blocking something out? You know, like, I don't remember any of that.
Yeah. Do you have kids, Brad?
We do. We have a 12-year-old and an 8-year-old.
Well, that's your problem. Your kids. I know we can't quote Cosby anymore, but like that's the kids make you dumb. I mean, that's I believe that. I believe that sincerely.
That is so true, man. What shifting gears just a little bit, Andy, you know, we talk a lot about writing and the ministry that you have through Iron Hill Press and you know, the men's ministry things that we've done together.
Yeah.
What is it about that groove, that men's ministry that draws you to it? Why is that one of your passions?
That's an interesting question. I don't know if anybody's ever asked me that. If I'm perfectly honest with you, which I hope I wouldn't be any other way.
Wait a minute. All those chicken dinners you were.
That's right. You
were telling the truth.
That's right. I wasn't telling the truth. I have a great dissatisfaction. Like I have a great dissatisfaction with the state of men's ministry and men's faith in general. I mean, for every guy like you two, we could name those guys in our church, Bryan, for every dozen guys that we're like, man, that guy's got it figured out, right? He's not perfect, but he's intentional. He's living. There are dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens who are, I mean, we look who are apathetic and who aren't plugged in and who aren't engaged. We look at studies and facts. I mean, 35% of 35% of Christian women in the United States go to church without their husband. 35%.
Goodness.
Men are living by and large detached from their faith, from meaningful expressions of their faith. And I think part of my desire to affect change in that area is coming out of a background of youth ministry, where I watched Christian kids, boys particularly, and Christian dads as I was leading their small groups for years and years, like just watching how underdeveloped their faith muscles were, and they weren't getting it from their dad. And, our women have picked up the slack for years in homes where Christian men aren't leading spiritually. And you look at Proverbs, and over and over and over and over again, the picture that's painted in Proverbs, especially, but in the entire Bible, is a mom and a dad. I mean, Solomon says, my son, wear the teachings of your mother and father, like garlands around your neck, like a pendant. And it's just the idea there of like valuing the spiritual teachings of mom and dad. And man, in most of the homes in our churches, I mean, dad's the first guy at the ball field, dad's got the kids in the hunting club, but he's not passing on meaningful spiritual lessons to his children. Well, he is, right? Because there's no difference in parent. You and I've talked about this. There's no difference in parenting and discipleship. And so everything is discipleship, right? Mm-hmm. There's not a secular and a holy. So when I'm at the ball field yelling at my kid on the pitcher's mound, I'm teaching him everything about what Jesus means to me. That's not parenting, that's discipleship. And so you ask why I'm interested in men's ministry. It's a begrudging call to it, honestly. It's a burden. I think there's some days where I get frustrated at the lack of interest in spiritual growth in a lot of men. And I just want to be like, man, let's go do something else. But I just kind of can't move away from it. God's just kind of got his hooks in me. And I really do, in this kind of second, after doing youth ministry for 20 years, in the second act of my life, I mean, I want to devote myself and the talents God's given me to just try to wake men up and to see them become the men God has desired them to be. And it's hard. It's slow going, but I think that's part of the challenge.
Yeah. I mean, and, thank God for moms who are standing in that gap, but
Gosh, you got that right. Yeah.
That's not their burden to bear by themselves.
Not by themselves. You're right.
I mean, that's a, and to be able to offer resources to men who are doing that, and to encourage men to do it well. We're fighting two fronts, man. We're fighting hypermasculinism.
That's right.
Masculinism. And then we're also fighting that what you said was apathy.
That's right.
And it's two fronts. And you got this world that sees, whenever you say when you say manhood or biblical manhood, for some reason their mind goes to that hyper masculine.
Yeah.
And that's not it. That's not it at all.
Nope.
That is a worldly view of a very misconstrued construct of what a man should be like. And having this biblical view that men should serve each other.
Yeah.
With
absolutely.
love.
Yeah.
And should put others before themselves, should work to lift up other people, and not this me. I'm, Tim the Toolman Taylor, raw. That's not what your goal is in all this. It's a biblical manhood.
Yeah. And I think that definition is so, I get asked that quite a bit, where do we see manhood in scripture? Isn't that culturally centric in a paternalistic society? I mean, yeah, some of it is actually, right? I mean, there's a lot of examples of manhood in scripture that if we lift them directly out of the pages of scripture without being good scholars, right? Yeah, it's coming straight out of a paternalistic society where women weren't valued. Okay, so that's not a great definition. So what is biblical manhood? For me, it's really simple. It's looking at the person and character of God in Christ and saying, okay, as a 21st century man, how do I embody that character? And so what's Christ's posture towards the needy and the broken and the outcast and the sinner? It's always gentle, right? He was the suffering servant of Isaiah. He is the humble servant of Philippians 2, that even though Paul says, equality with God was a thing to be grasped, he made himself a servant. He humbled himself as a servant, being obedient unto the cross, right? So we see Jesus. It's so interesting. And if you guys, I'm sure, have read Ortland's Gentle and Lowly, it's just an incredible book. It's really changed the way I've thought about Christ's posture towards us. Jesus, the moments where he was most aggressive and assertive and sort of that typical, in your face type character, it was to those in power. it was to the religious elite who he was trying as hard as he could to crack through the wall they had built that was separating them from God, right? His posture towards the broken and the needy and everyone else was gentle and welcoming, right? And I mean,
come to me.
That's right. Oh, Matthew 11, absolutely. And so, yeah, I mean, one of the things you and I've tried to do, I think, is on either end of the spectrum. I don't shy away from that term, toxic masculinity. I do think that's on one end of the spectrum, and on the other end is gender fluidity, right? I mean, we've got no distinction up here. We've got this kind of harmful, and I think toxic masculinity to me is like abuse of power, right? It's abusing your position, and then in the middle, it is a gracious, serving others, dying to self, committed, deeply committed, passionate, steadfast love of people that's grounded in the example Christ set for us. And that's biblical masculinity.
Yeah. We ought to write a book about that.
We should write a book about it.
We should write about that.
We should write a series of books, Brian.
Man, that'd be great. Call it How to Be a Man.
We could do that. That's a great idea.
So talking about resources, those who are listening who don't know what we're joking about, Andy he started this series of books called How to Be a Man. The first book looks at the identity, the person of Christ. Mm-hmm. The second book that he and I, there it is. Brad,
look at that. Hey, Brad, what do you see before Brian's name on the cover of that book? Because my name, it just says Andy Blanks. What do you see before Brian's name there? You see that it's 2 letters and a period.
Man, he worked hard for it.
Hey, Dr. Bryan Gill, I told him if you don't put it on a book cover, what are those letters for? You know what I mean?
Well, I know
that's the one time you should be able to use that, right?
That's right. I asked Andy. I was like, hey, I got this thing. Should we put it there? Should we use that?
I did this thing.
I said, man, if you don't use it there, I mean, I'm not gonna call you Dr. Bryan Gill. This is your shot,
Dr. Gill, the professor of catching brim.
That's it. I could find the brim, man.
Oh, but sounds like an old Dr. Gill brim professor. Sounds like an old MySpace page, doesn't it?
It sounds like it should be on a brim buster. Dr. Gill brim buster.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you could develop your own fly.
There you go.
Dr. Gill. I tell you, Brian.
Yeah, go ahead.
Speaking to that, one of our first. So Andy, we have these. I do men's ministry at my church. It's one of the things that I've stepped into. I've led worship for years and done missions for Mars Hill Church. But I've been moved into a position following a guy that actually passed away, Mark Powell, who's beloved Mark Powell. He did our family ministry. And so they moved me into that role. It was really hard for, I asked him, I was like, who's going to follow Mark? And he's like, I was thinking about you. I was like, are you serious? Are you sure that, come again? But the more I thought about it, the more it was clear, it was clearly the Lord's leading. And so as I was stepping into that role and thinking about that role, I feel what you're saying is, as family ministry, like I need to begin here with men, And so me and my buddy, Joe Langley, who does what I do on the Eastern Shore campus of Mars Hill Church, we came up with this once a year gathering we call Forge. And then now we do it 4 times a year, but once together where the 2 campuses come together. And one of our Forge events we do it down at the hangar at the USS Alabama, which is awesome. It's right in between our campuses. So it's in the hangar, and it's, all those airplanes and fighter jets and just all kinds of all around. This is a really wonderful atmosphere. And so one of the first ones we had Rick Burgess came and graciously came and spoke. And so we heard about that, and it really began me thinking around those lines, like how do we teach this? How do we get guys to engage? And it is, I agree with you. It is a battle. You want to shake these guys and go wake up, but that doesn't always work. But I have been experiencing, I really thrive personally in a small setting. Like I traveled around and led music for these big events, and I didn't really love those because that's not me personally. I really love like a 6-person, 7, 8 people around a campfire, that's where I'm at my favorite spot. That's my favorite place to be. And so I've been trying to find those kinds of places for the men at my church. And one of our elders, we were talking about this. He used this term, and I really like it. And we're really kind of adopting it. Is how do we find more front porches for our men?
I like that.
And so, what does the discipleship have to look like? Sunday school, or are there creative ways that we can do that where, we're golfing, or we're shooting sporting clays, or we're fishing, or we're, something active? Because it seems like that resonates with men more, as if they're moving and they're in action. How do we bring things like how to be a man? There is a place, obviously, for Bible study.
Absolutely.
Totally agree with that. But how do we do that in a more active way where we're drawing men into those shared experiences that we talk about all the time on here?
We have I resonate so deeply with that. Bryan and I have a guy at our church who has been a deacon and has been at our church for years, and he sends this email out 3 or 4 times a year. Well, it's one email that he'll send at the beginning of the year, and Steve plans these adventures, and he organizes them, and they'll be. I mean, I've gone multiple mountain bike excursions to Mulberry Gap Mountain Bike Camp in North Georgia. We've done we do the Coosa Challenge adventure race in Wetumpka. I've taken my kid, my oldest daughter, cave exploring. And Steve's the guy who's putting all these together. And he does all the legwork. They're just short little trips. He'll say, this is a date, and 4 or 5 a year. And sometimes your kids are with you. Most of the time they're not. But it's there's no curriculum. There's no nobody's got their Bible out, cracked open around the campfire. It's just Christian men spending, unscheduled time together and outdoors, and the rhythm of that. And that's what we all know, right? That's what the 3 of us know. The rhythm of that lends itself to meaningful life on life interaction. And so if you don't have, in some part of that, if the scripture's not there in some part of this process, then we're just hanging out, right? But if over here you've got some structured time of digging in the word together, and then over here you've got sometimes we can serve together, and then over here you've got kayaking and fishing and turkey hunting time. That's, I think, for men, that is the rhythms of discipleship.
Yep.
You know what I mean? That resonate with us.
That's good.
Yeah, I mean, so many times churches equate discipleship with Bible study.
Oh yeah,
and that's it.
And that's it.
Right.
I think that Bible study obviously is a part of discipleship.
Yeah,
and,
Randy Pope. I think he's at Perimeter Church in Atlanta. I think I've got that name right. He wrote a book years ago about discipleship, and I wish I could remember more about it. But there was one line, and I think he was particularly kind of poking at Baptist churches, and I know Bryan, our Baptist brat, know your background, but we can define and institutionalize everything, right? I mean, we can put everything in its little slot. And he basically was saying, like, for most Baptist churches, or big churches especially, discipleship is just the thing you do, or they kind of think it's the thing you do when you're not in big church, right? So it's like, oh, we got discipleship. That's what we do. That's what we do at 9 o'clock before we go to big church at 10:30.
Yep.
No, that's not. Yeah. Discipleship may happen there, but that's not discipleship. That's not the definition.
Man, when I was in Memphis, working in college ministry, I was, the golf course was a very
absolutely
good place for discipleship to happen. 4 hours, 2 hours at a time, one-on-one, or one-on, with a group of guys or whatever. You talk about life, you talk about real things that, and those scenarios really lend themselves to modeling a behavior that you're hoping that they will see and say, oh, well, that's how a godly man, or someone who's striving to be a godly man, would react in that situation. It's that whole modeling, and then maybe showing them how they should do, and living out the word. Man, that's good stuff.
And the front door to faith for most people in modern times that we live in is not the front door to the church. It's just not. I mean, the 20-something-year-old guy in society right now who's not in church, I believe his opinion, he doesn't have his opinion is set about church. He's already said, church is not for me, right? Like that. He's not going to one morning wake up and go, I think I'm going to go to church today.
Right. Those days are gone.
Those days are over, right? I believe that culturally, but that guy will go play around a golf with you. That guy will go hang out around the fire pit with you. Like, there's another door to faith. And I believe it's fellowship. It's being welcomed into a community of Christian men who are just real guys, right? Who are trying to live their life with intentionality and own their mistakes and are good friends with each other and laugh and have fun. And that's the front door to faith for most people, I think, culturally, where we are right now.
Andy, a lot of different people listen to this, not a ton, but a fair amount of people from literally all over. Yeah. It's really cool to see like who's tuning in and watching.
Yeah.
And so there's people that likely, I would bet, that aren't churchgoers, that are that guy, that
Absolutely.
are that guy or that gal. But specifically, I think for the guys that are listening, what message do you have for them? They don't go to your church, but you have an opportunity to kind of say, like, here's my message to you that are out there. What would you say to those folks? I
can keep it real simple. There's 4 gospels in the New Testament. Those are the 4 books that tell the story of Jesus, right? Mm-hmm. So the story of Jesus' life. There's one by a guy named John. And in John 10:10, Jesus is talking to his disciples, and he says something that's very profound. He said, I came to this earth. He's talking about why he came to earth. We believe that Jesus was Son of God, incarnated in man, fully God, fully man, lived on this earth for 33 years or so. And he tells his disciples why he came to earth. He said, John 10:10, I came to this earth so that my people, my children, can have life and have it to the fullest. And what I would say to somebody who has never given faith in God a chance, or they did at one point in the past and it didn't go well, I would just challenge you. I would challenge that person to give it a chance, to see if Jesus is able to keep his promise of a life of abundance, a full life, a life overflowing with fill in the blank, right? I mean, because there's so much richness to relationship with God. And it starts with coming to Jesus and giving him a chance through scripture and through learning about him and opening yourself up to the truth of the Bible. That I believe that there's a life made possible for men specifically, right? For all people, but that is a life that is overflowing with meaning and purpose and adventure and richness that is not possible apart from God. And so I would just say, man, give God a chance. I mean, we talked about C.S. Lewis in this podcast. I mean, that's Lewis's story.
Yep.
He gave God a chance. He was an enemy of God for his whole life. He said, okay, I'm going to give it a chance to see what happens. And that's a lot of people's story. And God's on record for coming through in those moments. And so I'd say, hey, just give it a shot. Give it a shot, see what happens.
You've got some pretty big news on that front, right?
I am. We're expecting our 5th child. No, I'm joking.
Nah,
I'll say our story on our 4th child was that we did not know we could get pregnant anymore. And we had not been trying to not do anything to have a baby for about 6 years. Got pregnant with a little guy. And so my wife said, what if that happens again? I said, we would just bless somebody. We would just bless somebody. There's people in our lives who would need it, who can't have kids, and we would just bless them. No strings attached, right? Just invite us to college graduation. Here you go.
Oh, that's funny. No, but you do. So you've been working on something, and it's I want you to pitch it. I want you to.
Oh, well, thank you. That's very kind of you. And you've been a big part of it too, and not just in ideating and being a friend there. We are launching, and I say that because I'm in developer nightmare world here with Apple and app developers, but we're coming to the end of it. We're launching a daily discipleship app for men. It's called Strive. And basically the idea behind it is that we want to equip men to pursue God, right? To lean into what it takes to have a meaningful relationship with God. And so it's a daily devotional app. There's devotions every day. And if you know anything about the ministries that Bryan and I have been a part of, these are meaty. These aren't super long devotions, but they're daily devotions that get you in the Word and that challenge you with it. Okay. High quality content, meaningful interactions with God's Word. So daily devotions, really, really helpful articles. Brian's written a couple of those and we'll write more. Just dad hacks and marriage hacks and, spiritual development stuff those articles will be delivered a couple times a week, maybe less, maybe more. A really neat tool, the resource that this app has is a sermon library where we have got Bible studies and sermons from our friends, from solid biblical communicators. They're just allowing us to pull sermons into this app. And so we're aggregating solid biblical content in a really slick, audio player in the sermon library. And then we've got a store with some resources in there that'll launch. But the neat thing about this app platform is once we get it launched, there's a lot of availability. We have to add things. And so we have podcast plan, podcast networks. We would love to have this wonderful podcast as part of that podcast network. We've got some big plans there. We're really excited. It's something I've been working on a long time. And the idea is really to just help men develop those daily rhythms of faith that do allow them to grow in their godliness. And so it's a neat app. We're really close to launching it. Waiting on Apple to finish some things up, but it'll be available really soon, called Strive. And you can find it in the Apple store. We'll be ready. Android's a couple days behind, but if you search Strive Bible app, you'll see it.
We're hoping that by the time that this episode launches, and goes live, the app will be live.
Yeah, we're live. Yeah. And it could be ready. I could get off this podcast and it's ready. That's how close we are. Apple's got to prove some things, and the Apple is not as anxious as I am to have it live in their store. So
one of the things that I love about this is that, it's got this content just readily available. I was doom scrolling the other day on my Instagram. I was thinking, man, I really wish I was doing something productive, maybe spiritually beneficial to my life, rather than just envying all these fly fishermen catching fish.
That's right.
But having this at your palm of your hand and it being readily available, and it is a slick looking app. You've showed me kind of the prototype of this thing. And guys, if you're listening and you're looking for something like that, this is going to be a great opportunity to get in on this. Yeah. It's great content. It's biblically sound. It's theologically sound. These are some really, really good, thoughtful writers that Andy has compiled and is providing the content for this stuff.
One in particular who's very, 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 he's handsome. He's smart. He does have a doctor in front of his name. I mean, he's the cream of the crop.
Well, I would say that I'm the low man on that list.
I don't
contributors.
I don't believe that.
You've got some good ones, man.
Well, and we hope to have more. And Brad, you're welcome anytime, buddy. There's, I think the first two Brian wrote for me. I don't even think I paid him for. So that's what you got to look forward to.
Yeah, he'll pay you twice what he paid me,
and that's probably what it'll be worth.
Well, this is, guys, I really enjoyed hanging out with you guys. I love the podcast, and you guys got to keep it up. It's very unique. There's not a lot like it out there, and it scratches an itch for me that I just don't get a lot of. It's really neat, and I'm excited to see how you guys have grown.
Thanks, man. One thing we like to do at the end of each episode is ask one question. So, what is your next adventure?
Oh, I think I already tipped my hand on that. The next adventure is
getting this app
going out west. Right. That's the big one. But going out west. We're excited to see. I've never been to Arches. That's going to be new for me out in Moab.
Oh man, that sounds awesome.
I know. I'm so excited. And we're going to take the Silverton, Colorado, take the train through the mountains with the kids. So awesome. We'll have a great out west adventure. Another one.
Man,
can't wait.
Well, hey, little tip of our hand to what may be coming this summer is hopefully we get Andy back on the show to talk about a book that we've all read together.
Yeah, we've been trying to get everybody together and have a little chat around that book.
Yeah,
I need to read it again, man. I don't want to say too much. I don't want to say too much, but it was a great experience. It stirred some things in me. It was I'm glad we did it.
Yeah,
that's cool. Yeah, I hope we get to do that. I tell you, man, there were so many good things today in our conversation, Andy. That invitation, I think, ultimately of God inviting us into his story is probably the thing that resonates with me the most. And really what we're about here on this podcast is that there's a lot to be experienced. He's invited us in. It's not boring. It's extremely exciting and adventurous. And he's invited us into that great story. And so thank you for sharing your stories with us. We hope this conversation does what we hope, and that's encourage people to write their stories, share their own adventures in what we love to call the storied outdoors.
Yeah. Thank you guys for having me.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, please take some time to leave us a review, or better yet, share it with a friend. We hope these stories encourage you to write your own stories and share your own adventures in the storied outdoors.